Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here with a very wonderful panelists that I have a lot to learn from. So I come from PKF O'Connor Davies Services, mostly mid-markets, which is very different from what EY does or Deloitte does, and one of the largest conglomerates here. But having said that, it's a very different dynamic in terms of what we are dealing with, both internally and externally. Mid-market clients are ready to embrace, but there's huge lack of education and a lot of resistance and control. Because one of the key challenges that we face in terms of scaling an organization is that pivot point where you give up control from the mid perspective to the higher good of the growth of the firm. So personally, in our own firm, as we have embarked on this journey of becoming an AI-enabled, AI-fueled enterprise, which I have been leading, as well as dealing with external clients, which are mostly mid-markets, young mom-and-pop shops, with very small or mid-market revenues. They want to make decisions. They're eager to embark, but they don't know where to go. So the consulting aspect of advisory has really taken off in terms of, the technology we provide, the models they're supposed to use, the kind of thought process that they need to take on, what kind of resources they need to bring in, what are the various challenges that they need to go through. So I'm personally dealing with this very hands-on on a day-to-day basis, where the challenges are very different, I'm sure, for the rest of the folks here on the panel. So I think to go through that and to overcome those challenges is one of the biggest challenges for adoption for middle market. And of course, investment in terms of into the technology. How do you place the right governance into the technology? Governance not being a layer on top of it, but becoming a part of the model delivery. Embracing that is becoming a challenge, again, from a literacy standpoint. Right before I came here, my own chief business officer asked me, I understand you don't, and I said AI cannot be a tool. It has to be an embedded workflow. It has to be embedded into our workflows. Yeah, I want to do that, but how do you do it? Can we get an external firm to teach us how to do it? So this is a challenge we are facing. So I think from an organization standpoint for middle market, a lot is going to depend on the management embracing the concept of change, wanting to change not just intellectually, but really experientially, and also educating themselves. I think trainings around the top executive committees, going to some of these classes, really understanding how the technology works, I think is extremely crucial.
Absolutely. Nitin, Suma has a couple of times painted EY and Deloitte as a big bad, big four. So over to you. How are you seeing the market in your global role? Focus from clients, issues, challenges. Over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think some of the tone was actually kind of set. Here's what we have been experiencing, and I will admit that a lot of the work that we do, and frankly, the global AI business that I lead for Deloitte, tends to happen with Fortune 1000 companies. That's kind of 85% of our business. What we are seeing right now, specifically in the past 1 year, is that there's been a conscious pivot from exploration, experimentation, proof of concepts, to actual real-world applications that are being taken into production. That pivot has actually happened. Second, there's a lot more discussion and investment appetite for scaling up, not just in a particular division or for a particular process or for a particular group, but actually kind of scaling up within that enterprise. Scale will take time, but that journey has started. It's no longer being discussed, but rather it's being executed upon. That's the second shift that we have actually now seen in the past 12 months. Third is there are some marked differences in terms of what's happening in one geography or one region. Example, in the US, particularly amongst the larger companies and enterprises, there tends to be a lot more focus in terms of growth or cost cutting. And AI essentially kind of plays on both aspects of that spectrum in terms of where and how you can cut cost and where and how you can actually kind of grow. So you actually seeing a lot of adoption of AI, particularly with respect to cost cutting or with respect to new growth avenues in US companies. The next market where we are seeing tremendous adoption, which I will admit has been a pleasant surprise for myself and many of kind of my colleagues, is actually in India. Some of the demographic trends are actually playing out favorably around adoption of new technologies like AI. But beyond kind of just the adoption of new technologies like AI, there's also a spirit now of, let's say, geopolitical competition. There's a spirit of pride. There's a spirit of entrepreneurship. And there's a spirit of, frankly, dynamism and energy that at times you don't see in other regions and countries around the world. That is playing very, very well. Frankly, if you ask me right now as to what is the second biggest growth market in AI for Deloitte, it's India. It's US and then India. The third market, which you can guess, is China. Now, there's a lot of scientific progress and R&D and investments going into China, probably more than many countries around the world, except for perhaps United States. But from an adoption perspective, you have a bifurcation. The adoption in multinationals who are operating and have joint ventures or subsidiaries in China is tremendous. The adoption amongst digital natives in China, absolutely fantastic. The entrepreneurship is, let's say, something that we can all kind of learn from. But the adoption, for example, in the state-owned enterprises, some of the larger state-owned companies is perhaps not what it could, to be honest, be. So you're kind of seeing that bifurcation. And then the last region that I would kind of call out, where we're also seeing some very good strides, but in a very specific area, that's the Middle East. And the area where we're seeing a lot of strides is sovereign AI. Big investments leveraging essentially the oil wealth that has been accumulated in sovereign wealth funds that are now being redirected to build essentially a post-carbon economy. Take a country like Saudi Arabia. Right? No surprises, they've spent close to $1 trillion trying to kind of build something that was called NEOM, which essentially is this massive horizontal building that is over, I don't even remember, 40, 50 miles that was kind of imagined. So it's not like a skyscraper, but it is a horizontal building that literally runs for about 40, 50 miles. And they've poured in close to $1 trillion. They've pivoted away from that mindset of actually kind of putting money into concrete and steel-based infrastructure to building a completely new infrastructure. That is data centers. Data centers so that the Middle East becomes what is called an AI refinery and processes a lot of the intelligence that the world could actually benefit from. But to process that intelligence, you need those data centers and the massive investments that are being made.
Right, super. And let me add some more context on India, specifically what I'm seeing in India. And like Nitin said, total breakaway performance now in terms of AI and ramping up use cases. I'll give you some examples. Some of these are in the public domain. You take a large NBFC company, very aggressive in terms of where they're investing in AI. So all the way, the call, let's say it lands at the call center, you'd have a human picking it up. Today, obviously, there's a bot which picks it up. It looks at the phone number. From there, it's able to figure out, the identity of the customer, links into a 360-degree view of customer in the back end, starts to now figure out that, okay, we could make an offer. Goes and looks up the pre-offer or the pre-approved database. Then it's able to have a conversation with the customer to say that, okay, here's what's already pre-approved for you. Do you want this kind of a loan? Customer says, no, the loan offer is for 5. Can you give 5 lakhs? You give me 7.5 lakhs. That the same agent is now, the digital agent is looking up the underwriting policy, understanding exactly what the terms are of that policy and having a conversation now. It's not 5, 7.5, here's what documentation you have to submit. Documentation comes in, advanced models for OCR kick in to look at all of the documents which are coming in. And then the loan could actually get written into a sales queue for closure or an underwriting queue, for example. All that orchestration, which is happening at the back end, is also getting enabled by AI. So now you fast forward this into what it means to the economics of a non-banking finance company over the next 3 years or 5 years. You'll find like we had the fintech, revolution, you're going to have totally different economics when it comes to something like lending. Now you extrapolate this into, all of the other industries, business processes, and you're seeing a sea change in how competition could happen and the new models which will evolve. And then I'll just give you one more example, which is on obviously the biggest market disrupted is in software development. And we'll talk a little bit about the SaaS apocalypse in a bit. But it's like large companies, software IT companies working out of India, all of their programmers are now moving en masse into using LLMs for code. That means massive increase in productivity, right? What does it mean to the economics of that company? So we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's a big market as well. The other thing is small models, big trend, right? Everyone is kind of wary of pushing all of their data into these big models with APIs, etc. So this frugal innovation concept, I'm sure you folks walked around the booths over the last few days. So many startups all building small models, becoming better in terms of figuring out how to get performance, maybe taking a large model, distilling it into a small model. So seeing lots of those kinds of frugal innovation strategies which will help India kind of sustain momentum in this area. So I just thought I'll give you. So we've got the global, we've got the corporate perspective, we've got the small business perspective. Let's jump into sovereignty. I think that's a really good area. Lots of conversation on sovereign AI. In the past go round in the digital, I would say, revolution, India and China took very different paths. Right? India, we use most of the global platforms, so to speak. So we use Google for search, we use Insta, blah, blah, blah. Whereas China took another path. They said, we won't do this. And they blocked entry of many of these platforms. So now, for good or bad, they have massive companies in China like Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba, etc., which can vie with any company. So what path should India take right now? So maybe you want to give that a shot, Nischal?
Sure. That's been one of my favorite topics since a few years now. I don't know, why do we need geopolitical shifts to start thinking local for local? But somehow it does happen like that. Even today, I talk about the top hyperscalers in the world. You don't have much choices. But I'm very happy that a lot of things are happening around the world, which has led to deglobalization, which is leading to journal deglobalization. It's not only for India. Before this, I was with McKinsey, and that was my favorite topic. I was just doing that everywhere. And I thought it's only in India, but it's everywhere. It's Australia for Australia, it's India for India, it's US for US. So I think unlike certain countries which have been taking that posture since very early days, like China, for example, everybody else needed a small nudge. And that nudge was about become self-reliant and self-dependent. And I think our PM did some wonderful work there already with lots of wonderful Hindi words around it. Then the second thing which came, which we are contributing to almost 50% of the STEM workforce. Who in the room, who amongst us would want to read periodic tables? I don't know, but look at this generation. My daughter said she wants to do chemistry. I hate periodic tables. I barely passed. So with all that fuel, and then AI, a very patriotic nation, and technology is no longer in controlled hands. It's for everybody. It's all, world is moving towards open source, open borders, and then local for local is awesome. I would love to see an Indian hyperscaler in the next year, and all Indians say we're going to launch everything on this. So amazing times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Suma, your views on sovereign AI, does it come up in your conversations? How are you thinking about it?
Well, I take two different perspectives. I think I'm from India. I grew up here, and then I've been in the States for the last 30 years. I do see a significant difference in approach and also mindset and adoption eagerness, innovation in the young Indians. really impressive and inspiring to me to actually see that. I do not definitely, this is the most maybe politically incorrect statement. I definitely, it's not on par in the United States, especially in the areas of science and tech. There are people focused on tech, and people who are focused on tech aren't focused on tech, but here the pulse is tangible. Like, it's like an electricity that's flowing, and I can feel it, right, when you walk through these corridors. So should India embrace it locally? I think it absolutely should, because we are 30 countries within one country. The demographic and the data needs to be catered to the local population for that to be inclusive. I'm also an advisor on investments into a VC fund that is investing in young Indian companies on the startup level. So I'm constantly looking at deal flow, and to see the amount of young Indians who've come up with fantastic ideas and are looking for startup capital in India is more than any other country right now statistically. So that itself, is a testament to the fact that we should take on more creative innovation within the tech space and not just rely on an OpenAI as a large language model, or and build our own. I'm completely for that.
Yeah. Nitin, specific question for you.
Yeah.
Should India build foundation models? Should we invest a lot in frontier models, large, multi-billion parameter models, or should we just use what the global guys have?
So I'll answer this in two ways. One is kind of on the topic of sovereignty, because this is very topical across every country, every region right now. And then kind of the trend towards specialized small language models vis-a-vis frontier models and what it kind of perhaps means for India.
Yeah.
When it comes to sovereignty, and I say this from the vantage point of kind of working in many different countries, it is practically impossible to actually achieve 100% sovereignty. What does sovereignty actually mean in the age of AI? It actually includes energy, infrastructure, compute, data, models, applications. You can achieve sovereignty, even a country like US or China, for that matter, can achieve sovereignty 1, 2, 3 layers of the stack. It's practically impossible to achieve sovereignty across the entirety of the stack. You take China, they're creating an electron gap compared to the West because of the abundance of energy, but they lack some of the compute that the West has heavily invested in and kind of built. You take India. India has the advantage of data. It is starting to deregulate the industry sector, particularly kind of the deregulation associated with nuclear power and inviting kind of private participants in nuclear energy. But when it comes to R&D investments in frontier models, it is still a bit lacking, as well as obviously from a compute and infrastructure perspective. Alliances, trade corridors, connectivity with allies is probably kind of something that every country would have to take a look at it. And it is quite likely that we may actually have sovereign corridors as opposed to just national sovereignty within a specific geography. Now, when it comes to kind of frontier models, there's a recognition and probably a bit of a humility that building large language models does require hundreds of billions of dollars of investments. The large language models, as they've been created in the US, whether it happens to be Gemini, whether it happens to be GPT, whether it happens to be Anthropic Claude, and even kind of XAI's Grok, they have been built on perhaps over $1 trillion of investment, over kind of millions and millions of GPUs, which are not easily accessible. And likewise, there's a lot of capital flow in China and the progress that they've made with respect to the triopoly of open source models, aka DeepSeek R1, Kimi, and Qwen. India does not need to replicate that. There probably is not even a need to replicate that beyond bragging rights. Because where is adoption happening? Adoption is happening with respect to application of specialized models for specific purposes. Specialized models for specific purposes that automate a particular task or a skill set or a job function or a workflow may not necessarily always require an LLM. For a country like India, which has 38,000 GPUs kind of right now and growing, given all the investment announcements that have been made, it is probably a lot more conducive to go down the path of focusing on adoption, becoming the #1 player in the field of specialized models, embedding them into the workflow and processes of companies, and increasing the national labor productivity rate, as opposed to spending hundreds of billions of dollars of equivalent in trying to build another frontier model just for the purposes of benchmarks and bragging rights.
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of a bit conflicted on this one, frankly. I think, how many of you guys saw the Servam launch yesterday? Yeah. So we first have our more than 100 billion parameter model, right now, which is, and it stacks up really well in the leaderboards, right? It's doing really well in the leaderboards. And I just feel that given where we are at this moment, and Nitin, I think your point is right, it takes a lot of capex to build these things. I still feel India needs to have, several irons in the fire, because nobody knows which way this entire trajectory is going to go of AI, right? So that's one part of it. But your point is absolutely valid. I think frontier models and foundation models are one part of it. Trying to get into specific business processes and then fine-tuning exactly what's needed for those, or even using distillation or whatever to get smaller models which are more effective, makes sense for the frugal innovation, which is a hallmark of a country like India. But let's dive a bit deeper into this, and maybe, Nischal, you've spent a lot of time in supply chain, IoT, digital twin kind of stuff, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, and just maybe talk about how you see just this new wave of thinking. Because earlier one would create a digital twin, you would actually have to essentially replicate the physics or the business context of the entire problem you're trying to solve. Whereas now, obviously, you have AI which can figure out the patterns and can work in an autonomous fashion. So where do you see that whole chain going? Manufacturing, GMR runs massive operations, airports, ports, etc. So how are you folks thinking about specialized models for those kinds of processes?
Sure, Mahesh. First, I want to compliment you. You navigated through the conflicted statement beautifully. You're a good moderator. Okay. Okay. To answer your question, I think it's very ironical when you think about technology, AI at large. My belief is we should zoom out of the world and think about it. You have to think it like you don't belong to the earth. Just look at what's happening. Otherwise, our thinking gets constrained by countries and what's happening, the geopolitical thing. You don't want I don't want anything I'm building to be held to ransom just because some president is unhappy in some country, right? I don't want that. So it should be a self-sustaining earth, self-sustaining humanity. But look at the ironic thing, the question you asked on humans give birth to AI and humans are standing in the way of AI. And that's very weird. It's very, very weird, right? It's so sad to see it. There are places where you literally can use decision support, but you don't want to use it because you say, like, I have 20 years of experience in this area. It's the thing has shifted, right? The defense mechanism has shifted from saying AI can't do it to saying, then what will I do? I'll lose my job. Now it's like defending and saying, I don't believe in these decisions because it's experiential learning, which is deep into me. So what I mean to say is, like, the one answer is easy, which everybody knows, and I'm just repeating what was in the textbooks is now really happening. You can create amazing digital twins out of environments. If you have, let's forget the funding. If you have the funding, you know that how IT, OT data can come together. You know how you can create twins, you can do simulations, you can do decision supports, then you get into predictive modeling, you can do decongestioning at airports, you know exactly when to put a counter before even the passengers asks. You can make the passenger buy what he wants to by giving recommendation engines. All that is brass tacks, frankly, now. Problem is, do you want to do it? Right. So if it's done, and suppose you get a decision support alert, would you want to follow it? Would you want to action it? Do you always want to come in between it? That's the problem. So my problem is the mid-management. The problem is the leaders can sponsor. Youngsters are hungry to do it. Funds are there. Intent is there. What happens? The mid-management. So the humans come in between. I also have a solution for that, which I've tried a couple of organizations. We'll talk about that later. I might be short if I speak on about the speaker here, but that's my problem. The problem is not about that. Now, when you talk of supply chains are coming out beautifully. There's no better world than this. You can predict stuff. The only thing one could not predict was that energy will become additional layer. When you're talking about AI stacks, talk about 5 years back, nobody knew. I was getting my SSD, the solid state drive replaced a few days back. I never knew the prices have blown off the roof because I never realized, because I was earlier with HP, IBM, Lenovo, and I used to follow trends and be almost the expert advisor on SSD versus traditional hard disks. And this guy comes to my home and he says, replace your SSD with a traditional HDD. I said, why? He said because SSDs have 3 times the price, because the compute is hungry and energy is expensive. So the AI layer itself has changed. Look at the layers you would draw when you would make the stack. And now I could see even our Indian tech ministers, everybody talking about the energy layer. So there are new layers getting added. In the adoption of tech, the mid-management layer has come in. Yeah. So if you talk about adoption stack, I would put that layer right in the middle.
Yeah, and I love the way you pivoted from digital twin straight to the problems with humans in the middle. So Suma, your views on, and you do a lot of work in PKFOD on just risk and governance. What do you think about this human in the loop? How do you, like Nischal was saying, how do you get people to relinquish control and start trusting the AI to make decisions for you? Because if you're continuously going to have interventions, then you find that that's not really effective. You don't get the ROI. So how do you see that?
A wonderful question, and I think everybody's struggling with it, the trust part, the trust economy part, in terms of the customer, the user of artificial intelligence. Number one factor I see is, again, lack of literacy on how the models work. A reasoning model versus, where do you use what? What is good for what? As a technologist or someone who's educated, you'll exactly know. Or you think you know, you do your best in getting the right answers, making sure it works the way it's supposed to. You take the top CEO or the head of audit in a firm, it goes through QC. Every task, all our tasks are now automated. They're all now going to QC to be tested. They're looking at it with a critical eye, not to promote it, but how to stop it. They're terrified. I can tell you from my experience within my firm, the QC department does not approve of it. We are trying very, very hard to change that mindset. So yeah, we employ a lot of, actually how it responds to you, how it actually does the action, and how the explainability of the responses. We are trying to embed a lot of that into the human in the loop. Another question that comes is, if we have to review everything, why do you have to do it? It just cuts our time by 40%. Okay. And how do you really measure ROI on it? How do we really measure that we are saving costs? How can we make sure that we're really saving costs? And does that mean, as a professional services firm who's consulting, does that mean our billable hours are going to go down? How are we going to handle that with our customer and make sure our revenues stay on top? Right now, the technology that's in place, like for example, we use OpenAI's ChatGPT, and we are doing a lot of work leveraging that as a baseline LLM within the firm to deliver automation in our audit or tax or within our advisory, for example. Some of the questions I'm facing is, we want to measure the cost savings on how you delivered this engagement, and we want to sum it up across all tax and audit engagements. How do you really do that? Is it just, how can you track how many prompts people are using to run a business plan, to write a business plan, versus using actual GPTs to run? You cannot really track the sessions. how do you really do that? And if you cannot track it, if you saw KPMG has come up with this, pushing the prices down to the customer and putting a charge on it, people are terrified that this is going to come down the throat. How are we going to deal with that? And that is not just on the professional services level, it's happening with the customer, the industry, front to back. So I think the metric is going to be a challenge, the actual metric of measurement in both cost saving. How do you measure this actually on a practical level? And also the buy-in of the explainability of the algorithm and trusting in it is definitely a challenge. We do our best in educating the teams constantly, but I think it's a process for sure, and it is going to take time, and as everything did. And there's definitely a fear of loss of control. That's definitely playing a big factor. What happens to QC jobs?
No. Mahesh, if you don't mind, I wanted to add something to this. So there's something very interesting I want to share. And sorry, it's coming in the way. So just before this whole AI hype started, I believe in this. I mean, you can figure out synonyms for it. I'm trying to coin a lot of terms these days. I love that. So one thing I love is the forcing mechanisms. How do you make a rallying cry for something so that it doesn't care about a very judicious change management. It just, the people have to just do it. And it goes all the way down or all the way up. So what happened was I was with this big conglomerate earlier, and COVID struck, and we had almost 15 locations to be audited. We were in an industry where audit is mandatory, not something where you could say it's COVID and sorry, we can't do audits. Huge warehouses, big setup there. All the funds were on the table, but there was no travel possible. We had KPMG and the likes with us on the panel, and we had to get audited. So interestingly, without knowing about this, me and my team, we were in good times, great sponsors in the organization. So I was always wondering that, because I myself got trained on internal auditor in IBM, I used to wonder, why do we need others to audit me? I can audit myself, or if I can get some decisions, I can audit my processes. If I'm honest to myself, I'll listen to me, right? Or at least let my neighbor audit me. So why do I need external auditors for even doing an internal audit? External auditors and statutory is fine, but why I'm getting external people to first come and understand my process and audit me? It doesn't make sense. Because I would
You're questioning the basics of a lot of the big four business
because I used to spend 10 days in explaining them what I do. Then they would understand what the process is, and then they would audit me on my process. Well, I'm on that for 20 years, and they just learned in a week. So we said, okay, let's see what's there in the world. And that's when Signavio was just born in Germany, and it was without SAP yet. So I talked to the founder, Mr. Jero Decker. We requested him to come over to India. He couldn't come directly to India, so we got him a partner. So we put all the processes, because my chairman said, I want to see all processes on the wall, just like the Cisco CEO sees it. Because the processes were very complex. Can you make them living processes? So BPMS was just born. So we brought the business process management system, and all processes were live. So you could see really what's happening. And they said, okay, now I want to crunch down the processes. Why is it taking so much time? Are you telling me it's a bureaucratic organization? I said, yes, it is. You always knew that, but today you're seeing it. So you could see live, digital twin of processes in a way. Yeah. Right? And then on top of that, we started doing the process mining part of it. And then process mining had arrived by then. And then the AI engine started arriving. That was again during the COVID time itself. They could give you enough decision support on what's broken. Yeah. And if you tell the AI engine that I want to do this in 10 days instead of 30 days, it'll just crunch it down and tell you, remove these 5 people, bring in this decision matrix, it's done. Now, do you want to let go of control? Correct. So that year, when the auditors came, we told them we don't have money. We can't put you in hotels. We can't make you travel around the world. We still want the thing to be audited. Are you in or not? And you are not going to talk to people. You're going to talk to our machines. So we made them all sit in a room. They just looked at the processes. They audited based on their decision support. We were done.
There you go.
And this,
Yeah.
what happened? The forcing mechanism. What was that? Do we need a disease to
Nothing
tell us
better
that?
than a client as a forcing mechanism.
Do we need a virus to tell us that?
Yeah.
And this virus was not in the computer, it was in the body.
There you go.
Yeah.
Super. Great. No, good. I want to pivot. We have 2.5 minutes left. I want to pivot over, segueing from what you said, Nischal, into professional services itself, and just the quote unquote apocalypse which is there in IT services, BPO services, consulting services. So Nitin, as you look at professional services, right? Where do you see professional services, including tech, BPO, consulting, legal? What do you see as the impact? I'd love to get your views, then Suma, and then Nischal as a buyer of those services. We can have a small conversation about that. Over to you. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, for us, as one of the largest professional services firm in the world, it is both a moment of change and an opportunity. What does that actually mean? For a lot of the traditional businesses that we have, we are seeing tremendous change. We do a lot of systems implementation, whether it's SAP, Salesforce, Oracle, Workday, etc. We also help clients in terms of their strategy, their blueprint, assessment, and provide advisory services. We operate systems. A lot of what we've traditionally been doing can actually now be done by augmenting our workforce through the usage of AI. Example, you take software coding work that we do. That is today augmented. Tomorrow, a lot of that coding is going to be done by the actual models itself. You take a look at some of the systems that we actually kind of implement. The question that is now being asked, that with the ever sophistication of agents, can we actually use a whole chain of agents that are able to automate a workflow? And if you can do that, do you and should you require a system of work, aka the many SaaS companies that are out there, and why basically kind of their market cap and stock price is being affected? So those are the changes that we're kind of facing. But the opportunity for us is if we pivot to new areas, sovereign AI, data centers, infrastructure, agentic AI, physical AI, robotics. If we are willing to reimagine our business, change our business, relook at our commercial models and how we engage with our clients, that's the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to throw some more color for people in the room, I just want to dive deeper into some very specific areas where we are seeing the change happen and how we are actually responding to that, right? And it's obvious that some of these LLMs can actually code, but what we did was we did an experiment. We gave some of our coders access to LLMs, and then we had a team which didn't have access to AI. And we gave them a user story. This was in a Salesforce.com project, right? Said that, okay, here's the user story. It was to do some visualization, a dashboard, etc. And it's quite amazing. The team which had access to AI uploaded the user story. They used Nano Banana to actually create the dashboard. They said, okay, it doesn't look so good, make these changes. And then from there on out, they actually created the style sheet, the UI, the experience layer, and then the entire mid-tier connections to database, etc. The team which didn't have access to it took around 40% more time. So there's savings, pretty significant savings in terms of time. Now, what does it mean to a professional services firm? And Nischal, hopefully you'll start seeing the impact of some of this. We are now, as we're responding to clients, the biggest challenge in doing that is a lot of our work is with clients. So clients have to adopt it as well. It's not just enough for the EY consultants to adopt AI. We want our clients also to adopt. You have some very pioneers in the space who are pushing consultants, but we find oftentimes clients are not fast enough. So we're actually giving proposals in two ways. We're saying if you do this project without AI, it's going to take you maybe 9 months to a year. It's going to cost you X. But if you do it with AI, allow me to bring in my tool sets. You get access to all of the open AI tools, which the AI tools you need. We can give you a cost saving of 15 to 20% off the top and do it in half the time. So that's the kind of impact which we are trying to see. And you trickle this out across all parts of the economy. You can start to see massive productivity increases. The question is going to be for professional services firms and clients, where that exactly that value frontier lies, right? Large contracts will come up for renewal. People will have to look at exactly how they are measuring productivity. Still not easy. Go to any of companies, ask them, well, how do you measure the productivity of a developer? Not easy to figure out, right? So this is going to force us to baseline some of those numbers and then start to see value add from there. But Suma, last word from you in terms of where you see this going.
I mean, I really like the points that both Nitin, you, and you said, Mahesh. I think I would take exactly what you said, Nitin, in terms of the implementation partnerships and how we are dealing with clients. That's exactly what we do. One of the biggest challenges also is what you'd mentioned in terms of the clients adopting the technology is that, there's I wouldn't say resistance, but again, fear, I think, a lot more in middle-sized firms and also investments and what that means. So to play that balance as a professional services firm, putting client in the center, which is what we try to do most of the time, still being able to give them the best delivery, give them the best technology. How do you influence them in a positive way for adoption? How do you help them make the best of their own business as we continue to not lose revenues? That's a very fine balance, I think, for us, because efficiency is directly translating into, do they need us anymore?
Yeah. So let's ask Nischal that question, does he need us anymore?
Yeah.
Nischal, how do you see this whole space?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's a great point in time. It's an amazing intersection of what AI could do versus the most skeptic profession, which is law. So I think I see four things happening amazing. One is, as an organization, when people think about the fact that they have to protect themselves with the highly aware intellectual property thing going on, the IPR piece. So rather than asking IP firms and all, they're able to do it by themselves. Like if you try, like I have this product, if you explain everything and say, I want distinctive features about it, I want to write the IP thing, that's where AI is coming in big time. And I'm just loving the way it kind of drafts it. It makes you do half of the job, and you're able to connect much better with it than you would with a IP firm lawyer who is using all the lingual and the terms and the jargon. Second is comes when you are having a backward and forward contracts, the CLM, the contract lifecycle management part, the clauses. If I am exposing AI to a controlled environment of what happened in the last 3 years, where did I go wrong? Did I leave money on the table? It's able to tell me, like, what clauses you should put in. So those are smart clauses I can put in, and that's awesome again. And this is all at the edge, practical stuff which we are doing right now. Comes the third thing, when I'm getting prepared for arbitration or something. Blessed are a country where the law is interpretative, right? It's a constitutional law, and it's about interpretation. I might have a different interpretation to what AI can interpret. There I'm getting a lot of decision support. So when I'm going and preparing and talking to anybody, like somebody who's advising me, I say, what about this? What about that? I have a lot more talking points. And even though I may not be very worthy in reading law, right? And the fourth is the judgments, which I heard in Singularity in 2016. I heard Peter Diamandis talking about it as a futurist, and Ray Kurzweil and Google, they were saying like, a lot of 40% of the judgments from judges will be by AI because judges just seem to be biased sometimes, So that's where the decision support could help, and so it's kind of touching all the corners, and I'm loving it. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so we've got a few minutes for questions. Let's open it up. Yeah, please.
I'm Himanshu. I'm GM Operations of a government MRO facility. So thank you, panel, for such a delightful talk and insightful talk. I have this paradox that we have spoken about during the conversation. Firstly, the studies from EY Deloitte show that the challenge is not as much technical, it is organizational. Secondly, when we start going that path, then we start expecting value at each stage. Whereas the value comes at the very end, so we are expecting at various stages. So my question is, with these two, and there are many other paradoxes, as a frugal innovation beholder who starts at the ground level with that limited budget as he starts with, what does he look at? Is he looking at next incremental step, which he had always had in plan, or he's looking for this big budget adoption which will deliver value, he doesn't know when, which itself is hypothetical in the first place because you highlighted there are no metrics. So where does he start?
Yeah.
How do you convince him that it is about survival? It is about that
Yeah, Suma?
I'd like to take that because we deal with consumers from industry, from your angle all the time. I would say it's iterative value. I think if you're working with the right consultant or if you're working with the right advisor who's helping you with the adoption of the technology, they should guide you in such a way that you get value at every stage and also showcase the higher scale value across. And it should also come with it, that should start on the task level, individual tasks that you're starting to now finish much faster and taking up to the next level where I would call it more an operational, more firm-wide, more, if not firm-wide, more function-wide automation where by then you have automated like 100 tasks. You have a pattern you see and then you start working with automation around a generic use case like say data extraction. You're extracting data. You could be using that as a use case across, doing many tasks, right? Just extracting data out of PDF, putting it in Excel. So simple, but people are doing it all day long, wasting so much time. Then the next comes using of a more complex technology like RAG or creating a document search engine for your firm that can look and analyze and summarize and give you information at your fingertips, which gives you more organizational scale. So I say these are the 3 levels that you should be looking at. And if you're working with someone, they should be giving you this advice.
Yeah, I think the era of doing large projects with a big bang value coming at the end is dead. It's really dead. Just given the productivity improvements, the pace at which the world itself is moving, you need to see just exactly like Suma said, the milestones have to be in weeks. It have to be like agile sprints, and you have to see proof of value at every step you go. Because if you leave it for 2 years, those 2-year programs will build something large, uske baad pura dunya change ho jayega. It doesn't work like that anymore.
I also wanted to add one thing to what you said. So when you said frugal, right? One thing which I see it's very important, like let the sponsorship, the funding, program sponsor, that can flow downwards in organization. When it comes to micro-innovation or innovation, you have to invert the organization. Let the youngsters in the organization take charge. They should tell where it's going. They know where the shoe pinches. Just empower them. Remove all the mid-management out. When it comes to execution, when it comes to things like emerging tech, don't put in people who are into thinking mode. Put the people on the action mode. These guys know what's there. They have the knowledge. They'll do it. They're hungry. So the funding, sponsorship, downward. Innovation should be upward, bottom up. I think that's the key from my belief.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I have specifically for Nitin is when we look at day-to-day interaction with the clients and the customers, there is this inside-out view of protecting revenue. Because you do large transformations, you have to have a lot of productivity takeout, FTE takeout, so on and so forth. How do we convince our own internal stakeholders to make sure that we help them transform their processes end to end, protecting the billability and revenue of the firm, and making sure that we deliver value to our clients? Because we come up with this orthodox traditional seat-based pricing and so on and so forth. How is that trends looking like?
Simply put, protect revenue today, but make sure that your firm actually survives tomorrow. That recognition has to be there, and it kind of starts with your board and leadership. You can go and protect whatever revenue you want today and maximize kind of a profitability or in firms like us, earnings. But we also have to make sure that if you've been around for 180 years, that you're not going to become a going concern in the next 8 years. And that does require some degree of vision, leadership, and fortitude. But as long as you kind of have that, and your North Star is to make sure that you're leaving a legacy behind that is kind of better than what you kind of inherited, it is your responsibility and kind of the leadership's responsibility and accountability to make sure that we are going to be around to even have that legacy. And that is kind of the recognition that companies like us have started gaining.
Super. Next question. Yeah.
Actually, sir, I had a question that being a young innovator, how to know that we are working in the right direction and having the right support system? Because in India, the funds are mostly on the basis of impact you create for the society and the grants are for that. So how to know that the direction is correct, and how can we ensure that the stakeholder management is also correct about that?
See, how to know whether you're working in the right area? I think it's a good question, because the space of possible areas in which you could invest your time is massive today, right? Since everything is getting disrupted. My advice would be pick a small problem where you have conviction, right? Where you believe that there is a problem to be solved, that problem can add value, to a company, and then focus on that and go deep, because it's very likely that all our ways of working across all of the industries is going to change dramatically. So, what oftentimes I find is, especially with startups, and I do a lot of advising of startups, that they are choosing their canvas to be too broad, right? If you're trying to, if your canvas is too broad, you're not going to be able to really zero in and solve that specific problem. So go deeper and then look for proof points along the way. Your first proof of concept, your first paying customer, your first ability to start to influence a larger ecosystem. I think those would be the milestones to look at. Yeah? But I wish I was as young as you right now at this moment in time.
We are trying to innovate and build anything in health tech.
Super. Perfect.
I
Great
think we may
idea.
be running out of.
There you go. We're out of time?
Runway.
Oh, okay. Okay. Super. Thank you so much to the panel. Lovely conversation. Great audience. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.